Hello, everybody. My name is Enuma, and the topic that I've opted to give presentation is refugees in Australia. So this is the table of content. All these aspects I will be going to cover all these aspects, including the introduction, that refugee and human rights. What a refugee? What is the definition of refugee? Who are called refugees? And the basic human rights. What are the human rights? And then I will be discussing the obligations and the rights that Australia must have to follow. Australia has obligatory rights to follow, and the right that Australia actually providing, actually protecting, and and the things where Australia is falling behind and its consequences, and then complexities. What if Australia protects the basic rights, and what could be the complexities? And also, I will be providing the reference I've used as a resource. And starting with introduction, this is the topic that I've opted for, refugees in Australia. My name is Anuma, and I'm very grateful. It's my pleasure to present on this topic in front of all of you guys. It's my very first experience. I will begin with the definition of a refugee. What is a refugee? Those people who left their countries or are forced to migrate to other countries due to some reasons, which include war, maltreatment, or brutality, is called a refugee. So there should be no misconception, there should be no hesitation or misjudgment between the refugee and migrant. Refugee are basically those who left their countries, or they are forced to leave their countries because of many mishaps going on into their country. Could be war, it could be drought, it could be lack of security, it could be lack of education, or many other issues that led them to move out of from their country. The migrants are basically those who leave their countries, who follow the rules, who get the visas, who fly here, following the basic rights for the betterment of their lives, for the study, for many other job opportunities as well. And the refugees are mostly from Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Lebanon, just because of the things going on in Iraq. In Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon could be war, could be lack of security, lack of resources, lack of jobs. Australia is why we are discussing this in Australia, because obviously I'm in Australia, and Australia is one of the most attractive destination for refugees. So it should be because of some reason, because instead of going to any other country, instead of going to Western countries, they are moving to Australia, just because Australia must be providing some better preferable rights to those people. So that's why they're moving to Australia. And according to that particular source, 18,750 refugees are coming to Australia every year. That is a big number. That is actually a very big number, and it is come. And this number is just because of some reasons. We will gonna talk later. So we have this refugee. So what is the human rights? So human rights are the fundamental freedoms. Sorry, excuse me. Human rights are the fundamental freedoms and rights that are thought to belong to every person, regardless of their race, country, religion, gender, or any other characteristic. So the human rights, the beauty of the human rights is that they are basically given by the nature. When you are born, doesn't matter you born black, you born white, you born short, you born tall, you born male, you born female, you born with disability, you born without disability, you born with some special skill. You have given rights by nature, and those rights are must protected by the people, by the country, by the community, just to follow the humanitarians in the obligations and or conventions through which Australia, the rights of Australia, the rights that Australia has to follow, the laws that Australia must follow for to protect the rights of the refugees in Australia. Australia can't send refugees back to their countries, as Australia is a part of Refugee Convention. This is known as a non-refoulement. According to the 1951 convention, those who are actually came into the definition of refugee, like they left the country because of some mishap, Australia cannot send them back to their countries. Australia must have to provide all the basic rights to those people according to this convention. And Australia has obligations to protect refugee rights according to the different international treaties such as International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Convention Against Torture, and the Convention on the Rights of Child. So basically, these treaties can lead or are actually leading Australia to follow and protect all the basic rights of the refugees in Australia. And the most important thing is Australia must protect refugees from discrimination. Protection from discrimination. Australia ensures that refugees are not subjected to discrimination. This is a very serious factor. And the protection of refugees' children. Australia must protect all the basic rights to the children of the refugees that Australia is providing to the children of the Australian citizens. It includes health, it includes education, it includes the laws that apply to the underage kids, which are called children. Obligations of Australian government. As we have discussed, the conventions, these are the things that comes in convention that Australia must do arrangement and economic integration. Arrangement and economic integration means Australia must do arrangement for their resident, for their employment, for their language skills. For example, if people from Afghanistan doesn't know how to speak in English, then there must be some coaching classes. As there are some classes going on in this city where I'm living in Liverpool, there should be some language skills that can lead them to fit into the environment, fit into the culture, and can lead them to the employment. And asylum rights in Australia, it's not legal to file asylum, but it is considered as a basic human right to file asylum as a refugee. So Australia doesn't force the people to move out to the third country or to their country. Australia does provide asylum, basic human rights. Australia protects all kind of rights of refugees, like they protect them from being abused, they protect them from humiliation or other cruel, dehumanizing, or degrading treatment. And the foremost, and according to my opinion, is a non-discrimination. There should be no discrimination at all in this assignment, in this presentation. I'm talking about refugee, but overall, if you discuss non-discrimination, this rule should be applicable to all the people of all race, all gender, all country, all religion. There should be no discrimination for anyone at all, and it has a serious consequences. And the right that Australia actually protecting. We have discussed before that 18,750 refugees are coming to Australia. It is because of some reason. And the reason is Australia provides liberty, freedom of speak, freedom of work, freedom of education, freedom of religion. As the refugees came from Libya and Australia straight away allows them to build a mosque for prayer for offer Jummah prayers. And Australia provides health to the newcomers, to the refugees who come to Australia. As if a refugee is in Australia and it's been 12 months, Australia within the first 12 months provide the basic medical facilities that Australia does provide to the civilians. And education, protection, work, and residence, these are the rights. These are the basic rights that need to live peaceful life and a standard life in Australia, that Australia is giving all those rights to the refugees. And there are the consequences. Luckily, Australia is providing almost all the basic rights. But what happens if Australia falls behind? Australia is following the 1951 convention. So Australia can't send the refugees back. There should be no discrimination. So if Australia fails to follow that rule, Australia can face international criticism, international bans, or diplomatic result. This can cause serious trouble for the Australian government or the Australian organization on international and domestic level as well. Private sectors can lose funding and may face legal action. Basically, the private organizations are running because of the funding from the government, from the non-government organizations, from the businessmen, from the United Nations. So if the private sectors are not falling, if none of the private factors are falling short to give the basic rights to the refugees, then they might get banned, they might lose out the fundings, and eventually it would cause trouble for those private sectors and the refugees and those who are working in the private sectors. And almost and again, domestically, they can be protested by civilians. Those civilians who actually stand by with the refugees, they can come out on streets. They can be vocals. They can be voice of those, and they can do damage by protecting for long time on the roads. This can cause a serious damage to the country's reputation. And Australia doesn't protect refugees, right? The thing we have just discussed, that the consequences, it has the same thing. If Australia doesn't follow, these things can happen to, they can be subjected to arrest, that the people who are sitting as the ministers of the governmental organization or the private organization, they can subjected to arrest by because they are not putting the laws, the basic rights into practice. They can be subjected to ill treatment or torture. The refugees, because as a result of the Australian government or the Australian organization falling behind to provide the basic rights, the refugees can be subjected to ill treatment or torture by anyone living in Australia. And freedom can be restricted because no everybody knows that their rights are not being followed, so they can do whatever they want to the refugees. It could be racism and eventually a food issue and complexities. When Australia will be providing rights to the organization, will be providing rights to the refugees, there could be complexities. Balancing national security and obligations. It can, for example, if Australia is too much concerned about refugees, Australia is putting its efforts of work time of 95% of work time in to protect the rights of refugees. There could be there could be problems for national security, as Australia will not be looking for those things as well. So there should be a balance. Australia is providing security and safety to the refugees. At the same time, it should be providing national security and safety to the rest of the Australians as well and to the Australia. Division of limited resources can lead to injustice. For example, if there is some limited resources, if there's some limited resources in some sector, so Australian government organization should do a balanced division of resources into the refugees and to the Australian citizens. Otherwise, it can cause injustice and it can cause a trouble. It could disobey or disprotect the rights of the Australians and the refugees in Australia. Cultural and background tradition issue. So Australian government and organization must be protecting, appreciating, and proving the cultural backgrounds of Australians and those refugees. Like if there is some Pakistani, Afghani culture going on, Australians should protect them, and this can be only possible if Australia is creating awareness, if Australia is spreading awareness about the culture and background tradition. There should be equal appreciation. There could be equal involvement by the Australians into the refugees culture and from the refugees into the Australian culture. Rights and resource might get reduced for vulnerable. If there are too many refugees and Australia is giving more than enough rights to the refugees, then the vulnerable people might get the opportunities reduced. Vulnerable people include people with disability, the child, the gay people, a woman. So there should be equal rights. The most important thing in the complexity is there should be justice. If you are looking at one expect more than the other, then the one can lose out and the other can win. So this will cause imbalance, injustice and finding and sorting out the main reason of migration. For example, if the migrants from Iraq, if the migrants from Jordan are coming to Australia just because of the security issues, then in Australia, Australians are not aware that they are here just because of security issues, so they can do the same thing to them, and this can a lot of harm to them. Australia must create awareness that these people are here just because of those reasons, so we should not give them again those stuff here. So Australia must be, Australian government organization must be creating or spreading awareness about the main reason of migration so that this shouldn't happen in Australia. And in conclusion, in a nutshell, Australia does provide the basic rights to the refugees, to the older vulnerable communities in Australia, and Australia is one of the best countries as Australia follows all the international laws and treaties. But it should not be on the cost of affecting the vulnerable, affecting the nationals of Australia. It should be a balanced division of every resource. In a nutshell, Australia is a good country. Australia does provide the basic rights to the refugees. Australia has some laws to protect the basic rights of the refugees and all the vulnerable communities. So this was my assignment, and these are the resources from where I have get my research. This was my first assessment. This was my first presentation. I hope you liked it. I will try my level best again to cover my mistakes. As it was my first assessment, I've tried my every aspect. I've tried my best to cover every basic aspect of the human rights and the given topic. So thank you very much for listening. Have a good day.